You are watching Krights TV, where the truth continues.
Kids for cash. That's what authorities say was the bottom line of a diabolical plan. Even more shocking were the identities of the two men behind it.
They were men in black, men with the power to take away your freedom and your future. Jim Avila reports that they're accused of using that power to get rich. Rich on the backs of children.
I went to court and I never came home.
I was very surprised when I was being led out of the room in shackles.
They put my hands behind my back, handcuffed me, and took me right away.
Kids locked up and taken from their parents on their first, even minor offense.
I was only in front of the judge for not even 4 minutes. He barely even looked at me. He was just looking at paperwork on his desk.
Rapid fire justice.
And my son was standing next to me. When I turned around, he was gone. He was already in handcuffs and shackles at the back of the room.
Parent after parent in this one Pennsylvania courtroom, stunned, mystified by what they witnessed.
I was helpless, absolutely helpless. And to this day, I could still cry.
A mystery in Wilkes-Barre, the heart of Pennsylvania's struggling coal country. Why were so many kids in Luzerne County's juvenile court sent directly to jail and in such a rush? They all had one thing in common. The same judge, Mark Chivarella.
I was 12 years old when I got locked up. I had no clue what to say when he asked me, how do I plead?
Eric Stefanski's offense? He went joyriding with his mom's car and ran over a barrier, smashing the undercarriage. No one was hurt, not even Eric. But in order to get her insurance to pay for the damage, Mom had to file a police report. The next stop, Judge Chivarella and the courtroom of absurdly swift justice.
Do you remember yourself standing in front of him?
He read me my charges and said, how do you plead? I didn't know what to say, so I looked at my mom and I said, guilty.
At 12 years old, Eric was locked up for 2 years.
How many questions did they ask you or him about his record?
Oh, none. None about his record, none about nothing to do with his life. None.
And what did your attorney say?
I didn't have one.
I did not think it was necessary. On his first offense, he's so young, I just didn't think that was necessary.
I had pretty good grades, but I was a cheerleader. I was in the orchestra until 9th grade. I did good in school.
Joelle Angeli's brush with the law came at age 15 after she took her grandfather's credit card and ran up a bill of a couple of $1,000s for clothes.
What happened in court?
I remember him saying this and staring right at me. Have you ever disrespected your grandfather?
And you were honest?
Yes, I said yes, and my grandfather was standing right next to me. He then said, you're remanded. And they walked me out. They put me in handcuffs and shackles in a side room, sat me in a holding cell, and walked my grandfather by me as he cried.
Yeah, a little sad face. And, here's one.
Jamie Truckee was 16 when Judge Chivarella sent him away, still a boy who signed letters home with a frowning face. His offense? Underage drinking and driving, and behind in paying the fines.
I miss everything, you guys, my friends, girlfriend, house.
Heartbroken and struggling, his parents, Charles and Susan Edwards, somehow scraped up the cash.
Well, I paid every nickel. He didn't owe a penny.
When I paid him, I thought he was free to go. And the judge told me, are you nuts? And they took him out in shackles.
It's not supposed to be like this in juvenile court. Incarceration is supposed to be the last resort for kids. But Marcia Levick, deputy director of the Juvenile Law Center, noticed a diabolical pattern in Judge Mark Chivarella's courtroom.
I think what we have here in Luzerne County is probably the most egregious abuse of power in the history of the American legal system.
And she had the troubling numbers to back it up.
The numbers of children going into placement in Luzerne County tended to be 2 to 3 times higher than in other counties. We have kids who were being sent to custody for things as minor as a child who shoplifted a $4 bottle of nutmeg, a child who put up a MySpace page taunting her school administrator.
Why was this happening? Levick turned her findings over to the FBI, and the answer to that question would rock Pennsylvania justice.
No comment, thank you.
Judge Chivarella and fellow Judge Michael Conahan had devised a scheme to pad their pockets on the backs of children. First, they shut down the old juvenile detention center by cutting off public funds, choking it out of existence, and then replaced it with a cash cow, a privately owned facility built by the judge's cronies for $58 million taxpayer dollars. The judges cut $2 million in secret kickbacks.
They sold their oath of offices to the highest bidders.
But there is more. The judges were not just corrupt. To keep all those new $300 a day beds filled with children, the government says Judge Chivarella did something awful, something unthinkable. Prosecutors say he sold the children into custody.
Ordered juveniles into these detention facilities despite the recommendation of juvenile probation officers that the child not be in prison.
You should be charged with child endangerment.
They are mobbed by a swarm of reporters, photographers, and parents calling them names.
Attach shackles to them and take them right off and put them away, because that's what they did to my son.
How could a judge, the beacon of trust in the American system, do such a horrid thing?
This is the new mob. This is the new mafia.
Well, they are a crime family. Chivarella and Conahan, all by their lonesome selves, they indeed shape a crime family. The old days, it was La Cosa Nostra. Maybe they'll call themselves the La Courthouse Nostra.
You're right.
Anger fills the airwaves. Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania explodes when people hear that men they elected and trusted to judge their children had profited off their incarceration, sent the kids to a private jail owned by cronies who bribed the judges. Prosecutors say they were in cahoots to then keep the jail filled with children who did not belong there. Talk radio host Steve Corbett.
Gangster judges were selling children into a prison camp. Where were the protectors of the kids at that time?
I think that we had a conspiracy of silence going on in Luzerne County.
Marcia Levick, the public interest lawyer who helped break the case.
There were officers of the court, there were members of the district attorney's office, members of probation, private lawyers, public defenders who were in the courtroom every day, and they had to know what was happening, and whether it was by virtue of intimidation or an unwillingness to get involved, the fact remains that nobody stood up.
In fact, parents say some of the court workers wrongly convinced them their children did not need lawyers.
And they basically said that, you know, I'm just going to get a slap on the wrist, that I shouldn't waste money on a lawyer.
Jamie Quinn was 14 when she was sent to Judge Mark Chivarella because of an after-school fight.
Did you hurt her badly? Did she have to go to the hospital?
No.
Was she injured?
No. I honestly expected that I was going to get lectured and get probation at the worst. And it was my first time ever in front of a judge. He didn't let me talk. I was literally in front of him for only like 4 minutes. He barely even looked at me. All I remember is my mom grabbed onto my hand and hugged me, and then they put my hands behind my back, handcuffed me, and took me right away.
Matt Klubeck did come to court with an attorney when he faced Judge Chivarella.
I had my dad's attorney representing me, but the judge told my dad's attorney that he was not able to represent me, so...
So you had an attorney, but he said no.
Right. I didn't get to tell any of my story.
Matt had been charged with assault after throwing a beefsteak during a family argument.
I was very surprised when I was being led out of the room in shackles.
But while the kids were languishing in juvenile jail, their judges spent their dirty money 1,000 miles south from chilly Wilkes-Barre in Jupiter, Florida, an enclave for the rich and famous near the homes of Tiger Woods and Celine Dion. Here at the Jupiter Marina and Yacht Club, an exclusive gated community, the judges partnered in a waterfront condo, now up for sale, worth more than $750,000. One of their cronies docked his 56-foot yacht, the Real Justice, here in Slip 50, now empty. We wanted to ask Judge Ciavarella about all these charges, but he refused to be interviewed, so we went to him.
Hello, Judge. I'm Jim Avila from ABC News 2020. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Hang on, I'll call you back.
You know, a lot of people are wondering how a man of such distinction like yourself could have gotten in so much trouble and sold these kids down the river.
Well, let's stop right there. Didn't sell any kids down the river.
I showed him in black and white what the U.S. attorney had charged, that he sentenced kids for cash.
It's not what you think it means. Go talk to the juvenile people in Luzerne County and you will understand what that means.
This doesn't mean that you got improper money for placing juvenile offenders into PA childcare.
Yes, that's what it says. We came to a plea agreement because we would never agree that that was improper. And that's why in the plea agreement you don't see any of that language. I'm not pleading guilty to anything relative to cash for kids, embezzlement, extortion, quid pro quo. Absolutely not.
You didn't take any time with these kids. You didn't let them have an attorney.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true. So what happens in juvenile court is there's a whole intake process. And based upon that intake process, information is provided to the intake people. They're the ones that make the recommendations to me as to where the child should be placed. And based on that information, I place that child, or I don't place that child, depending upon what they want to do.
Now, we've talked to several kids in your community.
I was literally in front of him for only like 4 minutes.
I never was able to speak.
And they all had 30-second court hearings like me.
And what they describe as to what happened in your courtroom is pretty amazing.
You take a look at their file and you look to see if this was the first time they had a run-in with the law. Might have been the first time they were in front of me. You may be surprised that it's not going to be as clear-cut as they would like you to think.
Are you seeing that to be true?
No.
In fact, Judge Arthur Grimm, a Pennsylvania juvenile judge himself, now assigned to review Judge Ciavarella's cases, has seen just the opposite.
That kids were in there for relatively minor first-time offenses and ended up being placed. The judge is incorrect.
And what of Ciavarella's rapid-fire justice?
Is that the way the juvenile system is supposed to work?
No, it's not the way it's supposed to work. I'm seeing cases which seem to take in the neighborhood of 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes. That simply is not the way to do business. It doesn't happen in 3 minutes.
And what about Ciavarella's claim that his trials were so short because he looked at the intake people's reports first and followed their lead?
The day of the hearing or the day of the admission, it's already determined what's going to happen.
Judge Grimm says that's exactly backwards. Hear the case, then read the sentencing recommendations.
You have no business reading those reports. You don't want to be tainted by somebody else's impression of a child. You want to try the case based on the facts.
The two corrupt judges have pled guilty to being secretly on the take. And now the state Supreme Court, just yesterday, authorized Judge Grimm to begin healing the wounds of the children whose rights he found were routinely violated by expunging the records of as many as 5,000 children sent away to juvenile jail by Judge Ciavarella, many of whom have taken their cases to the Juvenile Law Center for a massive civil suit.
I felt like I was branded as something. I was in jail as a freshman in high school, so I never went back to school.
So now at 19, instead of being in college, what are you doing?
Nothing.
Eric is back in school and hoping to get his driver's license.
You're not going to do nothing wrong, are you?
No.
No.
But like Joel, he's had trouble adjusting.
I don't talk to anybody. I don't have many friends because I can't trust a lot of people.
Matt works after school at a restaurant, but dreams of joining the Air Force after college.
That's what I really want to do. I want to be able to fly jets.
It's a hobby that takes him away from the troubled memory of jail at 14.
And that helped a lot because when I'm flying the planes, I'm in control of everything. Nothing else matters.
Still, Matt fears his conviction may keep him out of the Air Force. As for Jamie's dream,
right now I'm still in high school. I graduate this year, and I want to study criminal justice.
And just recently, Jamie picked up her college application.
Thank you so much.
Good luck to you, Jamie. So you're going to study criminal justice in hopes of improving the system?
Yes. I've seen a lot of bad stuff happen. It makes me really question people who we're supposed to trust. I don't want it to ever happen again.
We've seen corruption cases around the country in every state. What's different about this case that concerns you?
It's kids. Yeah. I'm sorry. It really, damn it. It really upsets me because it's on the back of kids. And that's unfair. Kids are malleable, but you know, talk about a bad lesson.
I believe it was 2007 when I was on the phone with a friend, and we were just chatting, and I heard a call from the bottom of the stairs. My mother sounded irate, and she yelled up to me, "Do you know anything about a MySpace page?" And I said, "Yeah, from like months ago."
How old were you?
I was 15.
What was this MySpace page?
It was a parody page about my vice principal. A couple of friends and I decided it would be funny to make fun of the school disciplinarian on the internet. And so we created this page, and I remember putting a disclaimer on it thinking, if anybody finds this, at least I can't get in trouble for it.
And you said things like, you talked about her and said she spends most of her time reading silly teen magazines, daydreaming about Johnny Depp and nothing but tidy whities, ooh la la.
Yes. Yes.
And so this was what your mother was yelling up to you about?
Yes. I mean, there were comments on there made by other kids that were not, that were obscene, and I will admit to that. But they were not my comments. I think I was held responsible for them because they were on the page. And,
so what happened?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is on my mom's end. She was on the phone with the police officer, and I didn't really understand what was going on.
Lorraine, can you tell us what happened with this phone call?
The officer called, asked me if Hillary's my daughter. I said yes. He said, well, I'm coming down to arrest her for making a MySpace page about her vice principal. So I yelled up to Hillary, do you know anything about a MySpace page and your assistant principal? And she's like, yeah, from like months ago. At which point the officer started shouting. I heard her, she confessed, I'm coming down there, I'm arresting her. And I'm like, whoa, you're not speaking to my daughter without an attorney, at least give me time to get an attorney. And he started shouting that that's how parents like me are. We let our kids off the hook. And because I was getting attorneys involved, he was going to charge her with internet stalking, abuse of the internet. He told me that they've been watching my internet activity and that he was coming down to arrest her. So
what about the lawyer for your daughter?
Well, I got off the phone and I'm like, now I'm thinking, where am I going to find a lawyer at this time of night? And like,
What time was it?
It was after I had come home from work, so it was in the evening, and I don't know any lawyers. We're not the kind of folks that have a lawyer on retainer. So I called my mom, and I said, do you know an attorney? And she's like, well, I do, but like not for this, and you're overreacting. Sounds like a very simple thing that happened. Call the officer back and try and talk to him. Just, follow the law, be cooperative. I'm like, okay. So I called the officer back, and he said, hey, you keep the lawyers out of it, and I'll reduce her charges to a misdemeanor of harassment. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, we can do that. What, are you still coming down? Can you wait till, I have at least someone here while you arrest her or whatever? And he said, oh, no, I don't have to come down. We'll send you something in the mail. And then that was in January, and we didn't hear anything for months. In fact, I kept calling him, saying, we haven't received anything.
So when did you hear and what happened?
We did get a paper in the mail. We had to go to juvenile probation. We had to do an interview there, bring all of her shot records, birth certificate, all that kind of thing, our financial information. They asked us some very intimate questions, which was odd.
You have no lawyer?
No, no lawyer. Again, I was told to keep the lawyer out of it and everything will go simply, and we asked the probation officer what's going to happen now, and he said, well, it'll probably be probation and possibly community service. Okay, do we get a lawyer? Like, no, that, we've done the study, you'll go to court, whatever. Okay. So then we went to court, and we walked in, and they had tables set up by last name. And we went to the table there, and they said, do you have an attorney with you? And I said, no. They said, sign here. So now I'm assuming, oh, this is where we get a public defender. And so I signed this blank form and signed, but you also have to understand that there were dozens of other parents there with their children at their last name table doing the same exact thing. So I'm like, okay, this is how it works. Then we went in a big room and we waited, and we thought the attorneys would meet us there. No one came. They said, we're going to the courtroom. We sat right outside the courtroom. No attorneys came. The prosecutor came out. The assistant principal was there. She gave him a kiss on both cheeks, asked him how the family was, and he said, don't worry about a thing. And we walked into the courtroom. They said, this is the case of, and the judge stood up and started screaming at Hillary.
The judge was?
Mark Chivarella, former judge.
What was he screaming at you, Hillary?
The first thing he said to me was, what makes you think you can do this kind of crap? And it was really off-putting. I was there that day in my mother's clothing because she insisted that I look nice, and at 15 years old I didn't have anything appropriate. And I'm already uncomfortable, and he started screaming at me, what makes you think you can do this kind of crap? And I was just terrified. I've never been before a judge before, and I wasn't expecting to be screamed at by one. So it definitely was jarring.
And what happened?
I mean, it took about 30 seconds, so it's hard for me to have exact details. But he said something along the lines of adjudicated delinquent, which meant nothing to me. And then I remember my mother's hands leaving my shoulders, and I remember gliding as if in like a dreamlike sort of state to this back room where all I can hear is the sound of my mother's pleading, her wailing and pleading, and I'm being cuffed, and the bailiff
You're being
is
handcuffed.
saying yes, and the bailiff says, "Look what you did to your mother," and it's it just, like I said, it sort of like time stopped. And I began to veer off to this like parallel universe.
Lorraine, did the judge hand down a sentence right there?
Oh yes, he said adjudicated delinquent, and he said send her up to fact for her to think about what she's done. And I looked at the officer and I'm like, but that's not what you said. And I'm like looking at these people who have said, it'll be probation, possibly community service, and I'm thinking, this is crazy, because I had called, in Pennsylvania we have magistrates, and I asked, my daughter's been accused with this statute of Pennsylvania law. I said, as an adult, what would be the maximum sentence? 1 night in jail and up to a $50 fine. So why on earth would I think they would take my daughter, who's never been in trouble? We had no family issues. We were not involved with the system in any way. Why would I think they would take my daughter away? So basically, I started, asking him, and then I became hysterical. This is the best way I can explain it.
You saw your daughter handcuffed?
No, she was like, it was very odd because my hands were on her shoulders, and as soon as he said adjudicated delinquent, I really didn't hear anything else. I had been a caseworker for 16 years, and I knew exactly what that meant. So I turned and was talking to them, and when I turned again, it was like she had evaporated. She was just gone.
I wanted to turn to our other guests in studio right now. Charlie Balasavage, talk about what happened to you. So Hillary was 15. How old were you when police first came to your house?
I was 14.
How old are you now?
I'm 23.
So you're 14 years old and the police came over?
Yes.
Why?
At first, I thought it would be because I was riding this scooter around without a helmet on because, and ended up it wasn't that. It was that someone had called, reported that scooter stolen.
Where did you get the scooter?
My parents bought it off of a family member.
They bought it for you?
Yeah, they bought it for me. So my parents weren't home at the time, so I had to call them. They rushed home, and the
police were there?
Yeah, the police were there. The cops arrested all 3 of us and took us down to the police station, and we had to write a statement and everything. We told them what happened, that we bought it, and they said, unfortunately, because we didn't have no documentation saying that they bought it from my family member, that they're going to have to charge with receiving stolen property. And so they said to my parents, you know, if I take the charges, maybe I'll get probation, maybe not even, just community service. So I agreed to it. I was like, okay, you know, I'll do that, because otherwise my parents were going to get charged with it.
Did you have a lawyer with you?
No, no lawyer. This was all the cops' suggestion, too, that I take the charges, nothing will happen, you know. And so I was like, okay, and I ended up having to go into court. And when I went into court, it was the same thing. You walk up to that table, they have that form.
Your mom was with you?
Yeah, my mom was with me. She signed it. We didn't have a lawyer at all. We thought also we'd get a public defender. That's not what happened. We walked into the courtroom. We were literally in there for maybe a minute. And the judge already knew what he was going to do with me. I mean,
this judge was named?
Shapiro. And I really don't even remember what he said clearly that I have a behavior problem because I had a speech impediment when I was younger, and because of it I was made fun of a lot in school. So I had a problem going to school, and he had records of that. So that was my big problem. He sentenced me to 3 months in Camp Adams.
Camp Adams?
Yeah, Camp Adams.
It's called Camp Adams?
Yeah. It's like a boot camp, pretty much.
Had you ever been detained before?
No.
Did you know where you were going?
No. They shackled me right there in front of my mother and hauled me off.
And how long did you serve in jail?
It was the 3 months I had to do in Camp Adams. Then they do a follow-up where I have to go back to court. And when I went back to court, I ended up having to go to a place called Clearbrook for 3 months because I experimented with marijuana. And I was truthful with them and told them that, yeah, I tried it before. So apparently I had a drug problem at that time. So they made me do another 3 months there.
When you first went to jail, you talk in the film Cash for Kids about having to earn a pillow.
Oh yeah, that was from my first 2 weeks at Camp Adams. They have like a system. Your first 30 days there, it's called like a ranger. You do nothing but like physical training and stuff like that. And yeah, every time I would ask for a pillow, no one would ever get me one. And finally, once I moved past that ranger stage, they move you to a different cabin. I finally got a pillow.
So ultimately, how long did you serve in prison?
Altogether, it was about 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
How did you end up in jail for 5 years on and off?
Probation violations.
So you would get out?
Yeah, I would get out. I would not go to school or something.
How did jail
like
affect you?
I mean, I was in there with people that actually belong there. That I've heard things, and like I guess I could say I was influenced. I mean, by these people. Even staff would say to me, "Well, what are you doing here? Why are you here?" I said, "I don't know."
Sandy Fonzo. Her 17-year-old son, Ed Kenzakowski, was sentenced to 30 days in a juvenile boot camp by Judge Mark Chiavarella. I began by asking Sandy to describe how her son, Ed, first came to be arrested.
Just a regular, normal, happy life we had. And the summer of his senior year, what would have been his senior year, he started, experimenting a little too, and, sneaking out of the house at night. I knew he was drinking. I always, it was just me and him. So when I did have a problem with him, it was always, I'm going to call your dad and your dad's going to come. But now he's,
He was a star wrestler?
Yeah, star wrestler. I mean, the scouts were all looking at him, many opportunities for scholarships. They were watching him since he was in junior high wrestling for high school. He just had a lot before him, a lot of good. He had a girlfriend at the time that was telling me stuff about him experimenting and, just getting a little bit out of control. I would call his dad, and his dad couldn't do anything anymore. He was this big kid, 6'1", and big muscles. He'd lift all the time, and not doing anything than any other, than what I did at 17 years old either. But he just had so much to lose, and it got to the point that his dad called one day and said, and Ed wasn't home. He was supposed to be home. He's supposed to be in school. And he found out that he was at an underage drinking party, and he had friends that he graduated with that were cops. So he talked to them, and they were going to go in and put some, paraphernalia on him just to get him caught, get him a slap in the wrist, let him, community service, educational program, anything to let him know what, he has just too much to lose. And this is his senior year. He's wrestled since he was 4 years old. And so that's what happened. They went and got him, and they took him in. He sat too.
They planted drug paraphernalia?
Marijuana
in his
pipe.
truck?
Yes. And so,
a marijuana pipe.
Right. And so, I get the call that he's down at the police station. Juvenile court isn't until Tuesday, so for the weekend he had to stay in jail. Tuesday comes along, and now all along, we're talking to the probation people. We're talking actually to the judge also. There was a sit down with these cops and knowing Judge Chivarella that this was all, in his best interest, just to get him a little slap on the wrist, wise him up, scare him straight. He's a great kid. He has a great future ahead of him. And yep, we know there's, nothing you have to worry about. We don't need a lawyer. The same story. You got off the elevator and they were there. Do you have a lawyer? No, we were told we don't need one. Okay, sign. And that was it. I don't know. I was just very naive, and I mean, I was never in my wildest dreams would I think these people that are supposed to have, they were the professionals. They have your child's interests at best at heart, and these are the people that you trust, and everything's going to be okay. He's going to learn a little lesson, and everything will be fine. And we stood there, and in 30 seconds, he was cuffed and shackled and taken away. And I mean, that was the worst feeling. Seeing him turn and look at me like, what's going on? There was nothing I could do. That's frozen into my psyche for the rest of my life, that look that was on his face. They took him to the PA childcare and said that he would be there until he got this psychological evaluation, which we all know was Judge Conahan's son-in-law, brother-in-law. I think it was son-in-law. Yeah, that was doing these psychological evaluations. Well, it was a whole 30 days.
The other judge who ended up being convicted.
The president judge that made Judge Chivarella the juvenile justice judge, yeah. So he sat in there for 30 days, got his psychological evaluation.
Were you able to see him?
Yes, you were allowed on certain days and certain times to go see him and talk to him, and he wanted nothing more. Mom, I know, this was so stupid. I just want to get back. I've missed so much wrestling practice. This is my senior year. All he wanted to do was get back to school. I had letters from the teachers, letters from the judges, or I'm sorry, from the coaches, in lieu of Ed's character of what a great kid he was, sent to the judge's chambers. And anyway, we had to go. So we're going now for 30 days, and I thought to myself, okay, this was good. He sat there, he got his head together, he wants to get back to school, everything's good. Well, we went and stood back in front of that judge, and he was shackled and cuffed and taken to a boot camp out in, it was Northwestern Boot Academy, an hour away from our house. Total military. They couldn't speak. They couldn't do anything. They were dressed in military attire. He was with, people from all over that committed when he would tell me the crimes that were committed, this is who my son was in with. They broke you down, tore you apart, humiliated you. he wouldn't tell me what happened when he was in there.
How long was he sentenced to Judge
3
Chivarella?
months. He went in there for 3 months, and then from there, because Chivarella said he had a drug problem, then he would have to go to Clearbrook, which was, you know, a rehabilitation for addictions. By the time my son got there, if he ever did have a problem with drugs or alcohol, he was never treated because they said this kid has spent so much time already, we can't even keep him. So then he was just released and thrown back out. Get back to your life. No school, because they gave him that amount of schooling in there, so he never got to go back to his high school, never got to wrestle. He was a mess when he came out of there. He
lost all chance of scholarship.
He wouldn't talk about what happened in there.
How long had he been altogether now in jail?
3, 4. He was 1 month there, 3 months there, and like 5 months, approximately. But he came out of there a changed person. Like I said, he was a 17-year-old, free-spirited boy, and he came out a hardened man that wouldn't even talk about what in. So to this day, I don't know what happened to him in there, but he would never talk about it. But he was just a different person, you know. He very bottled up, you know, wouldn't speak, no respect for the justice system at all. He knew he was wronged. He knew what was taken away. He lost his little girlfriend while he was in there. She left him for somebody, you know. He just lost, in that age, at that impressionable late age, way too much. He had way too much taken from him, everything he had, really. And he ended up getting into a fight while he was still on probation, so he would have to go in front of Judge Chivarella again. And now Chivarella takes him for 4 months and sends him to his other facility out in the PA Child Care in Western Pennsylvania for 4 months now. Loses his job, loses everything again. And the people that work there couldn't understand why this almost 20-year-old is doing in this juvenile facility. Nobody understood, but he came out of there, and I mean, that was it. He ended up in a fight, which he had to go into, and the fight that he did get into, that we took to adult court, was thrown out. There was just a fight between 2 kids. It was nothing. But Chivarella, you know, 4 months he went to that his other facility that they were receiving profit for, and that was it. He got into the fight. He was sentenced to a state prison for it, and he came out. He lasted for almost 5 months, and then that's it.
And he shot himself.
Yeah, in his heart.
We're talking to Sandy Fonzo. She is talking about her son, Ed Kenzikoski, who took his own life after an ordeal that lasted years, when he ended up originally in the court of Judge Chivarella. In the midst of what you were saying, Sandy, you said you came to know that Judge Chivarella was now being investigated, even though your son, Ed, would continue to be his victim. That takes us back to Lorene Transu now, because when Hillary was taken away from you in shackles, you started to investigate the judge yourself. Explain what happened, or at least take some action yourself.
So in the beginning, it was all about my daughter. So I don't know that any of this other stuff is going on. What happened is when they finally let me go from the room I was in immediately following the hearing, they allowed me, actually they called my husband using my phone, and it was cold, very cold that day for April, and they sat me outside the courthouse in a metal chair and told me I was not allowed to come back in. So as I sat there, I'm like, but I don't know anything. Like, where is she? Where's my information? And they handed me a business card from the probation department with a man's first name on the back of it and told me that's who I should contact. But I had no idea who that was. So my husband came and picked me up. But you're really in a state of shock when this happens, because it's so ridiculous, so just you can't fathom it. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So that first afternoon, my father and my stepmother came. My mother was calling me. They kept saying to me she had to have done something more. There has to be more to this. And I'm like,
more than
really,
a MySpace page.
Yeah, like, and I'm like, no, really, like
making fun of her assistant principal.
I said, there really is nothing else. And so I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And finally, my father said to me, this is not they call me Lori in my family. He says, this is not the Lori I know. She wouldn't just sit here and give up. And I'm like, but Dad, this is a judge. Like, what am I going to do? He goes, well, you're going to fight. So I called the name on the back of the card, and it turned out it was a public defender in our county. And he laughed at me when I said, you have to file an appeal. This is insane. He goes, Chivarella doesn't allow appeals. So I'm like, are you telling me that we can't appeal, or just that it's pointless, or it's not allowed? Like, what are you saying? He goes, well, it's pointless, but Chivarella wouldn't even like schedule it for you. I'm like, okay. So I called the public defender's office in Harrisburg. Pennsylvania's a Commonwealth, so things run a little bit differently in a Commonwealth. I called the public defender's office.
In the capital, Harrisburg.
In the capital, and they told me, well, no, of course juveniles can have appeals, but we're not getting involved in a county matter. Okay, so I called the governor's action line, and they were like, oh, we'll make note of this. I said, well, who else can I call? Try the ACLU. So I called the ACLU, I explained the situation. They said, absolutely, you have a case here. She had a right to put whatever she wants on MySpace, especially a parody, and she put a disclaimer that that's what it is, and we'd be happy to take that case, but we're not going to get involved in this county placement thing and custody. And I'm like, but now what do I do? Well, we have some other numbers, one of which was a woman at Rutgers in New Jersey. So I was like, okay, I'm a Jersey girl, maybe I'll get lucky there. So I called there, and the woman was so sympathetic, and she said, listen, I know somebody, a friend of mine works at Juvenile Law Center in Philadelphia, and since you're in Pennsylvania, maybe they can help you. So I called Juvenile Law Center, and I kind of gave them the information. And the person I spoke to, his name was Laval, and he was very, very soft-spoken, not excitable at all. So I didn't know how to read him, and he said that he would check with Marcia Levick, who was the head of the Juvenile Law Center, and find out if they could take Hillary's case. So I said, okay. And he would call me back. Well, the next day, he hadn't called me back, and so my father said, you give me that number. And he called him. The next thing I know, they were calling me, saying, yes, they were willing to take the case, but not for me. They would not be my attorney. They represent children, and they would represent Hillary as long as I was agreeable and Hillary was agreeable. Would it be okay if they met with her? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I said, listen, just let me know how much I have to pay, because like I do have a house. I don't have much equity, but I can get some loans and get some money together. And they're like, no, I don't think you understand. We're here for children. We want to help your daughter. Don't worry about any of that. I said, okay. So they went and saw Hillary, and for the first time we had hope. I still couldn't see her for 3 weeks. I was allowed a 1-minute phone call.
You could not see your 15-year-old daughter for 3 weeks?
No.
1 minute, 60 seconds?
Yes. That first phone call was the two of us sobbing hysterical, both apologizing to the other. It was a conversation of, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, Mom. No, Hill, it's my fault. I'm so sorry. That was our 1 minute, and then it was over. And then the next week, I think we got 5 minutes, and the next week was 8 minutes.
It was just 8 minutes.
But somebody is there listening, and if she started to talk about anything to do with the lawyer and getting out of there, they cut her off.
I want to fast forward to 2011. Judge Chivarella is charged, tried, and convicted. It's 8 years after Sandy Fonzo's son first was confronted by the judge and sent away. And so after Judge Chivarella is convicted, Sandy Fonzo, who's now lost her son, Ed Kenzakowski, he shot himself in the heart, she confronts the judge.
This is not a Cash for Kids case, and we hope somebody
starts
getting the message.
My kid's not here anymore. My kid's not here. He's dead because of him. He ruined my life. I'd like him to go to hell and rot there forever.
Man, come on.
No, you know what he told everybody in court? They need to be held accountable for their actions. You need to be. Do you remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember my son? An all-star wrestler? He's good. He shot himself in the heart. You scumbag!
Talk about that, Sandy. What happened? You were there for his trial?
I planned on being, and then when it came up, I couldn't get myself to go and sit there and look at him and hear the lies, and I kept myself away until the day of the guilty, you know, when he was found guilty. I wanted to be there. I was actually working, and I kept getting messages from everybody that he's found guilty of this, he's found guilty of that, you know, and I'm having a panic attack, and they're going to take him, they're going to shackle him, and they're going to take him, and he's going away today. So I was a mess by now, an emotional train wreck, and everybody at work was like, go. I just wanted to be there. I wanted to see him come out of there in shackles, and I wanted to see him go away. And I don't know how I got myself there. Somehow I drove myself there. Nobody knew I was there. And everybody thought I was at work. I don't remember the ride at all. I just ended up there, and I heard why I'm standing out there. I learned that he is not. He's going to be released to his daughter's custody, and that he won't be going to jail. So, you know, I just lost all hope again. You know, it always seems like you're just let down all the time. And they were going to do a press release, and he was coming out with his lawyer, Al Flora,
to do a press conference, right, on the steps of the courthouse.
The steps of the courthouse. So when he was coming, I just went with all of the media and everybody that was there, and I was just there, and I had no idea. But when they started, this was not Kids for Cats. I just lost it. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember what came out of my mouth. All I know is that all I remember is being, taken across the street after that, and that's all I remember.
Jeffrey Epstein is a wealthy financier who was convicted of soliciting an underage girl for prostitution in 2008. Before his conviction, Epstein owned a private island near St. Thomas called Little St. James. On this island was his mansion, which became the setting of multiple accusations against Epstein of child rape, child prostitution, and child sex slavery. Epstein is said to have frequently flown several associates to his mansion to engage in group sexual activity with minors. This is the reason the island is now often called Orgy Island. Further, Epstein's private plane was reportedly set up with a bed for trysts with the young girls. For this reason, the plane was nicknamed the Lolita Express. Virginia Roberts claims she was one of Epstein's victims for years. According to Roberts, she was just 15 years old when she was recruited by Epstein's lover at the time, Ghislaine Maxwell, as a sex slave for Jeffrey Epstein. According to official public flight logs gained through FOIA requests, Bill Clinton has flown on Epstein's plane over 20 documented times. It is even on record that Bill Clinton refused Secret Service on at least 5 of these occasions.
On almost every trip that I did go on, there were young girls around.
It is also public record that the Clintons have received multiple donations from Epstein. More concerning, Jeffrey Epstein claims he actually co-founded the Clinton Foundation. It is proven that in 2010, 2 years after Epstein's conviction, the Clintons invited Ghislaine Maxwell, who Virginia Roberts claims recruited underage sex slaves for Epstein, to Chelsea Clinton's wedding. There are photos of Maxwell at this event. Virginia Roberts claims she saw Bill Clinton visit Epstein's Orgy Island with 2 young girls during her time as a years-long victim of Epstein's. There was a lawsuit filed against Trump by a plaintiff under the pseudonym Katie Johnson earlier this year. She claims that Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump raped her when she was just 13. Johnson's accusations first came in April 2016, despite the alleged incident occurring over 20 years ago. She filed 2 lawsuits about this. Her first lawsuit was dismissed due to technical filing errors. Katie Johnson's second filing came in June 2016 with an additional anonymous plaintiff, Tiffany Doe. Virginia Roberts was asked about the plaintiffs and said she had never seen them before, despite being an alleged years-long sex slave of Epstein. Then, in July of 2016, less than a month after the anonymous Katie Johnson and Tiffany Doe's lawsuit was filed, their lawsuit was proven to be a fabrication. Journalist John Swain from The Guardian wrote, "Lawsuits accusing Donald Trump of sexually assaulting a child in the 1990s appear to have been orchestrated by an eccentric anti-Trump campaigner with a record of making outlandish claims about celebrities." Norm Lubow, a former producer on the Jerry Springer TV show, has previously been involved with disputed allegations that O.J. Simpson bought illegal drugs on the day Simpson's wife was murdered, and that Kurt Cobain's widow had the Nirvana frontman killed. It is true that Epstein and Trump were business associates on good terms. In fact, Trump told New York Magazine that Epstein was, quote, "a terrific guy," and that Epstein preferred young women. It is important to note that this quote is from 2002, whereas Epstein was first arrested and the public first learned of his crimes in 2008. And of course, not everyone associated with Epstein is automatically guilty of crimes against children. An extraordinarily long list of celebrities were on good terms with Epstein, including Chris Rock, Kevin Spacey, Barbara Walters, and Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor and writer of Night. The named celebrities even used Epstein's plane to get to and from events, such as celebrity parties and fundraisers. Trump also once used Epstein's plane to ride to New York. The connection between Epstein and the Clintons is a topic Trump has certainly not shied away from in this election. In fact, he has publicly spoken about Bill Clinton's connections to the Lolita Express.
Bill Clinton. Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
Newt Gingrich, once vetted for Trump's VP pick, has also publicly brought it up as a talking point against the Clintons, and so is Trump's former campaign advisor, Roger Stone.
Well, look, the New York Times is totally in the tank for Hillary Clinton. They're faced with this terrible story about Bill Clinton flying around the world with a convicted pedophile, actually leaving his Secret Service agents behind on at least 5 trips to go off with this guy by himself for whatever reason.
He made a contribution to the Clinton Foundation.
A convicted pedophile then donated after the fact.
Right, which means they knew about his status at the time they took the money.
While knowing Epstein is not by itself suspicious, what makes the Clinton-Epstein relationship raise eyebrows is, again, their long list of connections, including Jeffrey Epstein claiming he co-founded the Clinton Foundation, Bill Clinton having taken over 20 confirmed flights on Epstein's so-called Lolita Express, Bill Clinton proven to have refused Secret Service at least 5 times while on Epstein's plane, the Clintons inviting Epstein's ex-lover Ghislaine Maxwell, who allegedly recruited child slaves for Epstein, to Chelsea's wedding post-Epstein's conviction, and Virginia Roberts claiming she saw Bill Clinton visit Epstein's orgy island with 2 young girls. Of course, the notion that Bill Clinton was directly involved with any of Epstein's illicit activity is only based on circumstantial evidence.
This man's gonna be James Wolfe.
What kind of pictures you got there?
They're my pictures.
What you took here don't belong to you. When you come here in this country, when you get around to prison, you don't fuck around. You got it on the SD card? Let's have it. No, sir, I'm not going to show you that. I will take everything you got. Whoa, come here.
Hey, you can't take my camera.
I'm gonna tell you one hand to hand me the camera. You hand me that.
I think the best thing to do is to seize this camera, and we'll get a search warrant, and then we'll look at them pictures.
If you don't want to give it to me, I will take it.
What am I being arrested for? Trespass.
Trespass. You want to go ahead and turn and put your hands behind your back.
I'm cooperating.
No, you ain't. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. Welcome to the free state of Wind.
Awesome, isn't it?
Awesome, fellas. Good job.
It's been almost 24 hours since James was arrested. Sarah and I have left our apartment. We brought everything with us. I've been basically running on adrenaline for the last 24 hours. I've hardly slept. Really worried about James. Okay, we just got new news. He's going to be released very soon. I'm really excited. We're packing up. We're about to hit the road. I don't feel like sad at all about leaving the prison, but it's weird to be like leaving here so suddenly.
What's up with these shirts?
And it's kind of a relief because we were starting to get concerned that he might be in jail for a week, months, if the worst is over. I've packed up my clothes, documents, and swag. We're just gonna get in the truck and leave. We're gonna go to Texas.
What's up with Bauer? You ain't heard? On I go. No?
I'm actually calling because I've decided to resign.
He's all over Facebook. He's an undercover reporter. I mean, that was so funny.
And I was like, oh my God, I work with this dude like I work side by side with him. I would have never thought.
Oh, Mr. Brown, I hate to hear that. What's the reason for resignation?
Everybody was like, oh man, I knew it. He didn't fit in around here, you know.
Looked like, you were willing to hang in there and, hopefully promote.
You was pulling your notepad out every 5 minutes. I said, well, he ain't writing nobody up. Everybody had kind of like figured it out.
So in the future, if you decide to change your mind, then, you know the process,
Yep,
okay?
Yep. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow.